let's make some bass jigs. And the mold we're going to be using today is the brush jig mold from Do It Molds. And this specific jig mold is advertised to run through the brush and weeds a little better than some of the other ones because the lead completely wraps up around the eye versus having the eye sticking up above the lead, which can catch on brush and weeds a little more. And I can say that this does run pretty good through brush and weeds. So we're going to get right into the video, guys. Alright, so I have everything that I need laid out. I have my mold, I have my hooks. These are 60-degree jig hooks, which are specifically used in this mold. Every mold, has a different hook that they use. These are weed guard slots. I'll show you guys them in a minute. These are the weed guards that we're going to put in a little later. And have some pliers. I use these to take the jig out of the mold. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're primarily going to be using the 1/2 and 3/8 ounce. I'm not going to do any quarters because I don't really have any hooks that small. And we're going to start with a few warm-up pours just so we can get the mold warm. And that's running out the bottom, if you see that, just because I don't have a hook in it. Alright, now we're going to prep our mold. We're going to take our hook and insert the hook. And this is where the weed guard post comes in. This weed guard goes right here, which sets into the mold, which gives you a slot for your weed guard to go in later. So I'm going to close this down. Going to let this warm up for a minute. And here's our first pour. Alright, looks good. And we have a perfect jig. So what I'm going to do is take my pliers. That was strong enough. I'm just going to pull this off. And now what we're going to do is pull this pin out, which pops right out no problem. And it leaves the indent for the weed guard. Alright, so now we're going to do a double pour. I'm going to do the 1/2 and the 3/8 at the same time. And get the pins in.
What? Look, she's picking.
Close this and we're going to pour it. Okay, we're going to do the 3/8 first. And we're going to do the 1/2. Okay, there's the 3/8 and the 1/2. Both look good. I think we have perfect pours. And there's that little run that we did. So next step is we're going to go inside and paint them. Next step is we're going to clean up the sprue holes. That one broke off a little rough, quite a bit rougher than I'd like. So I'm just going to take a razor blade and I'm going to slowly trim this. And just like that, that looks good. We're ready to paint. Up next, we have powder paint. I find this is probably the easiest way to do jigs. You can spray them with an airbrush. You can spray them with spray paint. But I find that powder paint is probably the best way to do it. And all you need is your powder paint, your jig. You need a torch or some other form of heat. And I like to have a pair of pliers to hold the jig. That way you don't burn your fingers. And I like these type of brushes. I think this is an epoxy brush. You can use cheap craft brushes like this, but I find that this type works pretty good. Just fluffing the paint up. And I don't heat the jig and drop it into the paint like a lot of people do. I heat the jig, I take my brush, I dip it in the paint, and then I sprinkle it on. And I drop it on with a paintbrush because I like to do two-tone. If you heat and dip, it's a little harder to get a two-tone effect. You can do it, but I find it much easier to get a 2 and a 3-tone if you drop it on this way. We're just going to get a small flame going. And this flame is just barely going. I don't want a big flame because I don't want to worry about melting this. So what I'm going to do is just slowly heat it. I like to do about 5 seconds each side. And again, I like to do it over some paper just so it's a little cleaner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the bottom side of the jig with some green pumpkin. Sprinkling that on. And I normally wear a respirator, like I said. I'm only going to do a couple for this video, so I'm not going to put it on, but I normally wear a respirator. Just going to do a quick shot of heat where the black's going to go. You don't want to burn your other color. Tap off the excess, and we're going to go right in with the black. quick shot of heat just to blend everything together. And just like that. Looks good, nice and uniform. That's one of my favorite colored jigs. All right, now I'm going to show you guys my favorite pattern. This is my favorite jig pattern. And what I'm going to use for this is green pumpkin, some red, and some black. This is going to be kind of maybe like a crawfish pattern. Okay, what we're going to start with is we're going to start with a green pumpkin on the bottom of the jig. Okay, I'm going to shake the green pumpkin out. We're going to heat the underside, and we're going to throw some red on. And now we're going to go in for some red. That looks really good. Now we're just going to put a little bit of black accent. And you don't want a lot with this. And I don't want to put a lot of black on, so I'm going to knock most of that off. And I'm going to start up here. I'm going to start up high. Just want a little bit of accent. A little bit of accent on the side. This may not even show, but you can just see a little bit of black speckling there. It looks really good. I do really good with this color here. It looks really good when you put your skirt on. So the next step, I'm going to go do off camera. I'm going to go hang these in the oven at 375 for about 20 minutes, and that's going to fully bake this powder paint. Then we're going to come back and we're going to finish these up. So we are back from the oven. These look good. All the lines came out nice and good. They all blended together nice. Next step is we're going to add the weed guard. And what I'm going to do is I have a little bit of super glue down here that I already put down off camera. And it's going to get a good amount of super glue. I'm going to try to keep this on the weed guard the best I can. Push that in, make sure it's seated. And I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, then we'll put the skirts on them. All right, next up, we're going to add the skirts to it. This is my favorite part. I have a really basic skirt making tool. I made this out of an old pen. I took the ink out, cut the tube down, kept the writing portion. I have a little piece of bent wire here that I used to grab the skirts. I'll show you that in just a minute. And we're going to take our skirt collar. I'm going to push it up. And I'm going to put a couple on so I can run through these pretty quick. So now we can take that off. And you take whatever your pattern is. And the good thing with skirts, I mean, there's a ton of options out there. So you're pretty much just limited by your own imagination. And what I'm going to do is take this little piece of wire, push it through. I'm going to grab my skirt tabs. And I'm going to pull it up into the tube. About halfway. A little less than halfway maybe. And we're going to drop one of these down. And there's your skirt. Now we're just going to trim the tabs on both sides. So now we're all open there. And now we're going to get this onto the jig. And we're going to drive that up. And there you have it, guys. There's our finished jig. Came out looking really good. This is by far my personal favorite. Everybody has their own favorite color. This one's mine. I can catch fish from ice out to ice in with this, and it just seems to produce all year long. And as it sits, this jig is ready to fish. You can put a trailer on it if you'd like. Sometimes I run a trailer, sometimes I don't. Oftentimes when I throw this, I'll just throw it without a trailer and I still catch fish. And off camera, I'm going to make up the rest of the skirts and I'll show you how they came out. So this is how they came out. This is also one of my favorite ones. I didn't show you guys how I made this. This is kind of a rainbow trout colored pattern. I do really well with this in the spring and summer. Not so much in the fall for some reason, but spring and summer this does really well. I made a bluegill sort of pattern. This one I do really well in the spring and summer. Not quite so much in the fall, but this is a really good spring and summer color. This is another good color that seems to really work well. This is also one of my old faithful colors. This is just basically a green pumpkin jig. This one came out really well, looks really good. And we have a green pumpkin white. This is another good color. And we have a blue and black, which is also one of my staples. I do really well with this spring, summer, and fall. This is also another good color that just seems to get it done year round. So we're gonna wrap it up there, guys. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. If you guys are looking into jigs, hopefully you guys picked up some information. If you guys have any further questions, feel free to ask and I'll try my best to answer them. We're gonna sign off there, guys. Thanks for watching and we'll see you on the next one.